Well, let's bring it back here at home here in Phoenix in a very interesting meeting on the tarmac at Sky Harbor International Airport. As ABC 15 has confirmed, former President Bill Clinton was in town and met up with U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch as she was arriving in Phoenix. Now, this meeting took place just hours before the release of the Benghazi report, so we asked her about it.
I did see President Clinton at the Phoenix airport as I was leaving, and he spoke to myself and my husband on the plane. Our conversation was a great deal about his grandchildren. It was primarily social and about our travels. He mentioned the golf he played in Phoenix.
It doesn't end there. We're told the private meeting on board her plane lasted about a half hour. Lynch then told us there was no discussion of Benghazi, of State Department emails involving Hillary Clinton, or any current matter having to do with her office, Dan.
Well, my family received significant death threats shortly after breaking this story. Credit cards hacked. My children, we have code words. We have secret code words that they know what to do.
The reporter who broke the Clinton tarmac story has died of suicide.
Mr. Reagan.
So most of you probably already heard about this, but I do want to talk about it a little bit because it is really chilling that this kind of stuff is happening. Leftists will go, what do you mean what's happening? People commit suicide. It happens. Right. Well, I think we're all a little bit suspicious of this suicide. This is one of those things that is a delicate matter because our YouTube overlords, the social media tyrants, they're so quick to pull that trigger of misinformation. They have to sort of tiptoe around these discussions to have, which is ridiculous. We should be able to have open discussions about this. It's a real thing that really happened. This guy really apparently committed suicide, and there's a lot of people who don't believe that, right? There's just a lot of people who are skeptical of it. So I thought we'd take a little bit of a look at why maybe people think that this death is suspicious. Diversifying your investment is like building a sports team. Each asset plays different roles. You have offensive players, assets that make gains and pay dividends, but equally important is your defensive line, assets that will protect the value of your investment. And there's a 5,000-year-old asset that's seen every world crisis that there ever was and thrived. Gold and other precious metals. The oldest hedge against inflation and disaster. Your stability insurance. If you put gold into an IRA, you even defer the tax on all gains until you retire. So you get compound growth on everything. That can add thousands of dollars to your fund over the years. And you'd have stability, peace of mind that you made the right choice. Take out an IRA with Noble Gold this month, and along with first-class service, they'll be gifting you a 1/10 ounce gold bullion American Eagle coin. To find out more, go to their website, noblegoldinvestments.com, or call them at 877-646-5347. Again, noblegoldinvestments.com, or call them 877-646-5347. Everybody knows that the Clintons have been accused for many years of murdering people. That's something that a lot of people believe. A lot of people believe that Hillary and Bill have just put hits out on people they don't like. And the problem is that there is very little evidence, very little hard evidence to tie them to any of these cases of people who have, committed suicide or died in accidents. But what is really telling, and I think it's really weird, is that they seem to have a lot of associates who have died in accidents or who have died in suicide. And I've actually produced a video about that where I go through and I list all the deaths that people have attributed to them. Were they involved in any of them? I don't know. It's just one of those things where you can never really know. I mean, unless it's proven, unless there's hard evidence. I know a lot of you are screaming at your phone or your computer screen or your TV saying, what are you talking about? There's tons of evidence. There's tons of evidence. Well, there's not enough evidence to convict them in court, or at least there's not, or if there isn't the will to arrest them or prosecute them or investigate these things. So in either case, in the eyes of the law, whether just or unjust, there is no conviction, right? These people are not convicted murderers. They haven't been convicted of putting hits out on people. That's just the rumor, right? That's just the rumor. But it's one of those things where just like, man, if you look through the number of people who have died that are associated with the Clintons in these suspicious ways, they've committed suicide or they've died by accident, it is astonishing. And I've read the argument that, well, everybody knows somebody who's committed suicide. Everybody knows somebody who's died in an accident. Yeah, sure. Probably most people. I mean, I'm 41. I know at least one person who had committed suicide, a friend of my mom's. It was really sad. It was like this moment where it was like really impactful. I can't imagine getting into the double digits of that, knowing literally dozens of people who have died in horrific accidents or who have committed suicide. That's incredibly unusual, so much so that it's driven people to believe that perhaps the Clintons had a hand in at least some of those incidences. Is it true? I don't know. I think that's for all of us to decide looking at the evidence. And it's certainly for courts to decide if, in fact, they're ever accused of this sort of thing formally by the authorities. Will that ever happen? I highly doubt it. But let's look at why people maybe think this guy, Christopher Sine, why maybe they think that his death wasn't perhaps suicide, and why they think maybe the Clintons had something to do with it, and why people suspect something other than the official case here. So let's go ahead and read this article initially. This is from the New York Post. Christopher Sine, Alabama news anchor who broke Clinton tarmac story, dead at 45. The Alabama TV anchor who broke the news of the infamous 2016 tarmac meeting between former President Bill Clinton and then Attorney General Loretta Lynch died Saturday in apparent suicide, according to reports, and his employer. Christopher Sine, 45, was found dead by Hoover, Alabama police around 8:13 a.m. Saturday after cops received a call of a person down at his Scout Trace home. The former college football player's death is being investigated as a suicide. Chris was a tremendous leader in our newsroom, wrote ABC 3340 in a Saturday tribute to the reporter. He worked with our reporting staff on a daily basis, but also worked behind the scenes with the I-team and with news managers on coverage of major events. You were very likely to get an email from him with a story idea in the middle of the night. He was passionate about journalism and showed it each and every day as he pushed himself and his colleagues to be the best. Sine had 3 sons with his wife Laura, whom he met at the University of Alabama in the 1990s, where he manned the offensive line for the school's football squad, and she starred as an all-sec volleyball player, according to the local ABC affiliate. Sine's Instagram account told the story of a devoted dad, with photos showing him spending quality time with his family as recently as last week. And so this is really part of why his death is so suspicious, right? This guy had an awesome life. He was passionate about his work. There's nothing here that suggests that he was anything but happy at work. And yeah, I did have a look at his Instagram, and this is him. This is him, his beautiful wife. I mean, these are 3 cool looking kids, sharply dressed. I mean, this is a great family. This is a happy guy. I mean, gosh, there's he is with his kids, taking his kids to baseball. I mean, just like there's nothing here to indicate that this guy was a suicidal guy. And, so a lot of people are suspicious. A lot of people say, well, this does not look like a suicide. This looks like a guy who was killed, right? If we scroll down to the bottom of this article here, it says, Sine had told Fox after Loretta Lynch's story, went and became big national news. He said that my family received significant death threats shortly after this breaking story. He said credit cards were hacked. My children, we have code words. We have secret code words so they know what to do. And so that's the thing. Like, why would anybody send death threats to this guy? Who were just sort of like, I think everybody online gets death threats these days, but this guy took these threats as credible. This wasn't just like random people trying to be obnoxious online. This was serious. If you're a supporter of Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton, breaking a story that makes them look bad that's not something that is naturally going to encourage people to threaten your life. I've seen the reasons why people's lives tend to be threatened online. And it's not because you break a news story that is negative about a political operative, typically. I mean, if it's somebody like maybe Barack Obama, I could understand that. There are some figures in politics that elicit a very almost obsessive response from some fans, right? From some supporters. I don't think Bill Clinton is one of those people, at least not anymore. All right. So this idea that the Bill Clinton, Loretta Lynch tarmac story elicited death threats from random people in the public, I don't believe that. I think these death threats would have been from people who maybe weren't random. Maybe they were from people who had a very specific intention, maybe people who had an interest in this story. Yeah, personal interest, like they were involved somehow. So I think that, or they were connected to people who were involved, So I think that this story, the fact that he had received death threats and that he thought they were very credible, I think that is another reason why people think maybe he didn't commit suicide. And this is an MO of, I don't want to say it's an MO. How do I refer to this? This is a pattern, okay? This is a pattern with the Clintons. If the Clintons are mad at you, you don't necessarily find yourself being screwed over right away. You don't necessarily see the consequences right away. They don't go after you immediately. This is another story I wanted to talk about. Matt Lauer. This is a story almost nobody really was able to connect. Matt Lauer was fired and his career was basically ended because of the sexual harassment stuff. And everybody kind of took for granted that it was true because Matt Lauer was a leftist, and conservatives were like, oh, look at the leftist who committed sexual assault or whatever it was, sexual harassment. Ha ha ha. What a loser. He's fired. Nobody really looked into it. But here's the problem with that. Matt Lauer had actually gotten on the bad side of Hillary Clinton. What happened was during the 2016 election, all the reporters were told you're not allowed to talk to Hillary Clinton about her emails. You're not allowed to talk about the emails. And in a famous interview between Matt Lauer and Hillary Clinton, Matt Lauer asked Hillary about her emails, and it really pissed her off.
So judgment is a key.
Temperament and judgment, yes.
The word judgment has been used a lot around you, Secretary Clinton, over the last year and a half, and in particular concerning your use of your personal email and server to communicate while you were Secretary of State. You've said it's a mistake. You said you made not the best choice. You were communicating on highly sensitive topics. Why wasn't it more than a mistake? Why wasn't it disqualifying? Were some of the emails sent or received by you referring to our drone program, our covert drone program?
Yes.
Director Comey also said this after reviewing all the information. He said, there is evidence to support a conclusion that any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation. You mentioned you're in Pakistan. Some of the emails you sent and received happened while you were overseas. And Director Comey also said that while they have no proof, we assess that it is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email accounts.
Matt, there is no evidence. Of course, anything is possible.
And the rumor was at the time that Hillary Clinton went absolutely bat crap crazy. She starts screaming at her staff, throwing things, like she was irate. She was furious that Matt Lauer had, for whatever reason, decided to ask her about her emails. And she had reportedly said something about ending his career, wanting to destroy him and all this. Now, at the time that was reported, it was dismissed as a conspiracy theory, as, a debunked, right-wing thing that were trying to smear Hillary Clinton. But then about a year later, Hillary Clinton's book comes out, her little autobiography of her 2016 presidential campaign, and, blaming everybody for her loss except for herself. And one of the things she mentions in the book was the Matt Lauer incident. So this is something that she remembered. This is something that she had dwelled upon for a long time. It had simmered in her mind. And she wrote in the book that, she was pissed off about that. She actually confirmed essentially the rumors of her being pissed off about the Matt Lauer situation. I don't think she said, I threw things and I was like, I was irate, because of course she wouldn't say that. But she did say that it pissed her off, that she thought it was like a betrayal of some kind. Now, then I think it was 2017, maybe it was 2018. Matt Lauer was then accused of all this sexual harassment, and he was let go. He was fired. It's kind of interesting how this enemy of the Clintons had his entire career destroyed after he crossed Hillary Clinton. Like, for how many years? Like, okay, let's say the sexual harassment was real, like he was sexual harassing people. According to the reports, this had gone on for years and years and years. But it was only after he crossed Hillary Clinton that this became an issue, right? So this is one of the reasons why I look at the Democrats and I say they like to leverage people. They like to get dirt on you and they like to leverage you. This looks like a situation in which Hillary Clinton, maybe she had this ability to destroy Matt Lauer from early on. But if somebody crosses you and you destroy them the next day or the next week, it's obvious what happened. But if you give it a year, or if you give it 2 years, or if you give it a little while, and then you destroy their career, well, then maybe people don't make the connection so easily, right? So I'm convinced that Hillary Clinton had something to do with this whole Matt Lauer sexual harassment situation. I think that had a lot to do with Hillary Clinton. In fact, I think that was Hillary Clinton's doing. That's my speculation on that. And you guys can check out that story. It's a fascinating story. You can look into it if you're interested. But yeah, so this is another situation in which this guy, Christopher Sine, he crosses the Clintons, and then 3 years later, suicide. He's a happy guy. He likes his work. Suicide. So let's go ahead and take a look at that Fox interview that he did about this, because this is really quite telling. What he says here.
It was the tarmac meeting that rocked 2016, a seemingly secret rendezvous between Bill Clinton and then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. If you thought that story was laid to rest, well, think again.
Well, a brand new book from the journalist who broke this story is revealing explosive new information about the encounter. Here now is author of Secret on the Tarmac, Christopher Sine. Chris, good morning to you.
Oh, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
All right. So from the get-go, this just didn't add up, did it?
Not at all. When I broke this story, we knew that something had occurred here that was a bit unusual. It was a planned meeting. It was not a coincidence. It was planned. It happened. And this details everything that they don't want you to know and everything they think you forgot. But Bill Clinton was on that plane for 20 minutes. And it wasn't just about golf, grandkids, Brexit. There's so much that doesn't add up. And even as time has passed, there's so much I think that even Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton have forgotten.
How do you know it was planned and not just a happenstance? Hey, look, our planes are next to each other.
I have a source that walks me through it from point A to point B to point Z. And my source saw it all unfold and says when Bill Clinton arrived at the airport, he waited. He knew Loretta Lynch was taxiing. The plane was moving. He then sat and waited in his car with the motorcade. Her air stairs come down. Most of her staff gets off. He then gets on as the Secret Service and FBI are figuring out how in the world are we supposed to handle this? What are we going to do? You know, this story isn't about right or left, Republican, Democrat. It's about right and wrong in journalism, and that was my focus of this. It's about real journalism, getting to the facts.
But why do you think this didn't get more attention then? I mean, you look at the way that Attorney General Bill Barr is being treated now. You look at the way that the Trump administration has been treated. You think that this would be worthy of more attention than it received and also more scrutiny. Why didn't it get that?
You and I are on the same page on this. As journalists, you have to ask yourself, why are people not delving into this? Why are we not looking into what exactly happened? Loretta Lynch, in December of 18, she went before House Judiciary Committee, House Oversight Committee, excuse me, and testified. And in there, she mentioned that Bill Clinton flattered her, talked about Eric Holder, talked about how things were going at Justice, talked about her job performance, not this golf, grandkids, Brexit.
Well, and you've paid the price for this career-wise. What kind of threats or what have you received?
Well, my family received significant death threats shortly after breaking this story. Credit cards hacked. My children, we have code words. We have secret code words that they know what to do. And that's why I came back to WBMA, ABC 3340 in Birmingham, because when I was enduring the death threats, it was my former Alabama football family and my teammates, my coaches who circled around me.
Wow. Oh my. Read all about it. You can get the book right now, Secret on the Tarmac. It's at Christopher Sine, SIGN.com.
And on Amazon as well.
All right.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Crazy. So he was receiving these threats and he was concerned about himself and his family. In fact, this was one of the reasons I think that the Clintons believe that Hillary lost the election, the breaking of this story. So they had real reason to hate this guy. Now, I remember when this story broke. And I remember Bill Clinton saying, all we talked about was golf. We just talked about golf. And I remember thinking, like, Loretta Lynch has never played golf in her life. Have you seen this woman? She's not only has she never played golf, I don't think she even knows what golf is. You talked about golf. That was such BS. I mean, that was a big mistake. I think a lot of people heard that and just went eye roll. Like, come on, that's not what you guys talked about. It was laughable. It was a laughable excuse that Bill Clinton made, and nobody believed him. Nobody remotely believed him, and so. This was really embarrassing. This is really embarrassing for the Clintons. I think there was a lot of things that they've done over the years that have embarrassed them. But, a lot of these things, like, for instance, getting angry after Matt Lauer asked Hillary about her emails. You know, that story breaking, I think that was probably a little bit embarrassing for Hillary. And I don't think she likes being embarrassed. I don't think the Clintons like being embarrassed. I don't think they like being crossed. You know, everybody really dismisses this idea of the Clintons somehow getting to these people, ruining their careers, or having them somehow commit suicide or get into some kind of an accident. People dismiss this as a ridiculous conspiracy theory. But it should be noted that there was a guy who at one point came out and said, his name was Larry Nichols, and he came out and he actually said on a radio show that he had been hired by the Clintons to go out and take people out. That was his job. He was a hitman, and he says that he was at first instructed to do this for people internationally, to international threats, so that when he was then, starting to take out people in America, he didn't think of it any differently. He thought of it as like a duty to his nation, something like that. Now, was he lying? Maybe. Maybe he was sort of digging into this arcanicide idea. He had heard about it maybe, and he was making it up because he wanted to be popular or something like that. That's totally possible. I don't really believe it. People most of the time on face value, I tend to be skeptical. So I'm skeptical of this guy, but it's out there. This guy has made that claim. And, it's just like, again, there's so many people who have died in mysterious circumstances who knew the Clintons. And this is just another one of those examples where it's just like, wow, that's a bizarre coincidence. The guy who breaks this case and whom I think Hillary Clinton to some degree blames for her 2016 loss, that guy just mysteriously commits suicide, like a lot of the people that the Clintons know. It seems a little bit weird. But what I'd also like to present is this idea that, look, this is a petty revenge story, right? If this somehow turned out to be true, we somehow got evidence about this, and we knew that this guy was in fact taken out in some way, then this would simply be a revenge story, petty revenge, right? There's nothing that like they said, this guy, his career was already destroyed immediately after he broke that story. He had to go back to his local news channel. And so, it's like his career had already been destroyed. There was not really a huge chance that he was going to be breaking a lot of news stories about the Clintons. So anything that happened to this guy beyond what had already occurred was simply going to be revenge. And so it seems weird to me that anybody else would have done it. However, I have been working on this idea lately that, how do I put this? So everybody knows about the concept of the deep state, right? And who is it? Who's in charge of all this kind of stuff, right? Whoever it is that's controlling these things, right? And I'm just going to say, I think it's primarily the FBI is kind of running things at this point. And the FBI certainly has the ability to take people out. We know that. That's obvious. So could it be the FBI working with the Clintons in this way? Obviously, I don't think so. I think that's a ridiculous idea, and I would never propose such a thing. Anybody who thinks so is a crazy conspiracy theorist. Put on your tinfoil hats, ladies and gentlemen, because you're nuts, and I don't associate with people like that. But let's jump into there. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. That seems like an unnecessary risk. Why take this guy out? He's no longer a threat to anybody on the left. He's got his little job in his local station, which I'm not trying to demean the job. I think it's actually a fantastic kind of career to have. But at the end of the day, he probably wasn't a huge threat to the left. So I think anybody who's sort of working machinations behind the scenes would recognize that this guy isn't somebody they really should be going after. So to me, this looks like a very personal thing. If the guy didn't commit suicide and there was something else that happened to him, this is personal, right? And what do I think happened? Well, I'm not going to say what I think happened because I want this video to go out and to be seen by people. And I think that gives you an idea of how I think about this. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm curious what you guys think. You guys can go ahead and put your views in the comments. I'm always curious to see how people disagree with me or how they agree with me and see what they think's going on behind the scenes here. But yeah, I'm very suspicious about this guy's death. I am not convinced that he committed suicide. He seemed like a great guy, seemed like a happy guy. I don't buy it for a second. Anyway, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just, well, better not to talk about it. Good night.
Someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government,